Now they're in the right way. No one's ever done that before. That's a new one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
I told you, man.
Yeah. That's super awesome. Yeah, no, it's been 12 years, bro.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
man.
we started on at the Roxy Hotel.
Okay.
Which is in Parramatta.
Yeah.
It's
So
an
I was there,
old,
right?
old school cinema. You know, one of those twin cinemas before they did the multiplex
man,
cinema.
I remember it because I worked for Hoyts, and they had it back in the day when I was
Okay.
for Hoyts. I was always hoping to go work there because it was one of the nicer ones, you know.
Yeah, it was, and it's iconic as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then I used to go nightclubbing there. So,
Yeah. That's it. I've got interesting stories about that actually.
Yeah.
The first year running Made in the West,
Right.
we had it at the Roxy, and the second year.
Did they still have their screens up?
Well,
This is where the story comes in.
okay, so I'm in a pub. Let me. Where do I start? This is a hard story to start because it's a very long story, so I want to get through it quickly.
Okay, cool.
So people have heard this story before. If my hardcore listeners have heard this story before, I'm sure. I was in a. There was nowhere to show movies in Western Sydney for Western Sydney Film. That's basically where it started.
Yeah.
You know, some people might remember like Trot Fest.
Mm-hmm.
We entered some films in a Trot Fest and some other festivals in Sydney, and we didn't get in. We're a bit disheartened. We're like, oh shit, maybe we're not. Maybe the passion is blurring the talent here. Maybe what have we done wrong? Yeah. But we went along to those festivals and we realised our content was on par with this shit, man. And then we started thinking about it and other things that happened in Western Sydney. We had that little brother syndrome, right, in Western Sydney. It's definitely that little brother. Yeah, we're the underdog.
100%.
And I just realised that, because I came from the music industry, right? So I was a musician, always promoting shows, doing, talking with venues. And, in the music industry in Australia, the person that is the least paid is the band. The people writing the stuff, but the artists are the least paid.
Yeah,
the venue
it
gets
sounds
paid.
like filmmakers too, right? The filmmaker's the last person to see the money after the film is released.
Well, that's what I saw at the start, right? I saw at the start. I didn't want the music industry to be. I didn't want the film industry in Western Sydney to be like the music industry in Western Sydney.
Yeah.
It's set up so that everyone else wins except for the artist, right? So I had this sort of chip on my shoulder, and I interviewed this guy in a heavy metal band. And he was talking about how he couldn't get signed to a label because that was back in the day. He wanted to get to a label.
Yeah.
Now that was the deal. You got a label deal, then you were making music seriously.
You made it.
So essentially, when you make it, they give you a loan. You got to pay the loan back. They don't tell you that part of it. It's quite dodgy.
Right.
But instead of doing that, because he couldn't get into labels, because I was doing this interview for TV for a music show, and he told me, he goes, "Well, I just set up my own distribution network." I just started making my own CDs. This is back before streaming, obviously. I just made my own CDs, set up my own distribution network so he could sell his music from his band. And what happened out of that, he started selling other bands' music under his label.
Oh,
so he became a Western Sydney label.
Right.
And that fired a neuron off in my brain about the film industry in Western Sydney. And I thought, all I got to do is get these cool cats into one room. That's all I got to do. And then they'll start collaborating, and then all I got to do is set up network meets and run this festival every year. And then an industry will formulate out of that, and it has. It's not that I'm saying Made in the West is the only thing that's made this thing happen, but it's certainly a yardstick in the field of that happening. It's not creating the wave; it's also creating the wave and surfing the wave at the same time. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I could see that happening, and I thought, well, to show your film to people, you need to set up a network. And that's what Made in the West sort of started out as. And I had this idea, and I was in this pub bitching about how there's
As you do.
no spaces for artists to be shown in Western Sydney. And it's the same in the music industry. It's all taken up by pokies. No one's interested in art. They're just interested in gambling. And this bar manager said to me, he goes, you're in a cinema, right? Because I was in the Roxy Hotel having a beer.
You didn't know it was a cinema?
Didn't know it was a cinema.
Oh, wow.
Right, so I'm in this,
it's been there for years.
It's been there for ages, man. I'm just in Parramatta having a beer, having a bitch.
Wow.
And, the guy goes, you're in a cinema, right? Like, if you can bring 100 people here on a Thursday night, you can have it for free.
Nice.
I'm like, great, because I've organised music shows before.
Yeah,
I'm like, I know in my mind,
I can do that.
I can get 100 people here. I've just got to make a poster, do a few posts, do a bit of promotion, try and get a radio gig and promote it. That's how you do it. So I went out and did that. And they showed my own movie, of course, and it was great watching people watch my movie, and it's great watching people watching other people's movies, and that's how Made in the West was born. It was born out of a void being there, a chip on the shoulder about how the industry works, or how the arts industry works, and being really focused on being an ambassador for it to make sure that the artist is protected.
Yeah, I love that, man.
And that's what. And now we have Made in the West Creative, so we run our business as an agency.
Oh, wow.
So we take the pool of Made in the West artists, and we connect them with clients.
Oh, really cool.
Yeah. So we make sure we broker those deals with industry.
So you oversee everything.
Yep.
Contracts.
A lot.
Of it. Oh,
A lot. We EP it. So we essentially, Misty
Nice.
and I are executive producers. We've so far produced 8 films, I think. Maybe
Oh, wow.
7 shorts.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we've done probably, last year we did 5 films last year. We've done 2 this year. We help produce other festivals as well, because other festivals look at our festival and go, hey, can you come and do this for us?
Yeah.
So we do that, and that's basically how we turn the worm, and it's great to be at this, because it's been 10 years to get here.
Yep.
It's 10 years to get here, right? And that's what I figured out. It takes 10 years. If you're going to be good at something, it literally takes 10 years.
Well, my film took 7 years, so
Yeah, well,
there you go, man.
what led behind that, Like,
Yeah.
was it just the 7 years to make the film, but then there's the years before that?
No, I'm counting 7 years from the beginning to this point. So
Okay.
Actually, it's actually this week. If
Yeah.
I was to look at my first draft, it was something like 12th or 13th of June, 2016.
Yeah.
And I remember it very clearly because my son had just been born. He was about 2 months old, and I was working full time, writing on my spare time at night. He'd be waking up, and me and the missus would be taking turns to look after the baby. And you're good?
Yeah. No, don't mind me. I'm just checking, make sure we're recording.
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
Just thought something stopped or whatever.
No, I'm just double checking.
Yeah, so I remember just writing really late at night, 2:00 in the morning, and and then the first draft, and I emailed it to myself that day because I wanted to know what the date was, and it was around this week. So it took about 3 years to write, and that was part time, working full time. I was working like 12-hour shifts for a big American film company at the time. So it's like my days were like 16 hours, getting ready and getting ready and traveling and not much time to sleep actually when you're doing a 12-hour shift. And
12 hours is harsh, man, because that means
man. And
it smashes you.
And not only that, I was doing the graveyard shift, so I was starting at 7 p.m. and finishing at 7 a.m.
Adverse sleep cycle as well.
Yeah, so no sleep.
Double-edged sword, yeah.
Yeah, so I dare say it took about 3 years part time. Writing the script, about 12 or 13 drafts, making sure that it was killer. And then it probably took another year just on pre-production, if you like. It was development / pre-production. It's sort of like mixed or meshed together.
Yeah, I got you.
So that was like 2018, I believe. And during that time, I spent 12 months casting the whole film. Like I spent so much time. I was like, really needed specific, actors. And then because
you had a real strong focus on what your characters were and what their aesthetic, their attitudes,
authenticity, and it's hard finding diverse actors. I mean, we've been hearing a lot about diversity, obviously, in the last few years. But because I grew up in Western Sydney, and it was always diverse. It wasn't about ticking boxes and creating characters that didn't exist. It's all truthful and very authentic.
It's organic in nature.
Yeah, it's organic. So trying to find African Australian actors were probably the hardest because there's not many that do acting. I mean, you have to pull people out of their normal jobs and go, hey, do you want to
have a shot at this?
Do you want to have a shot at this? And I had a couple of those, and I had to educate them on acting and go through rehearsals and workshops and lost my train of thought.
Well, but you're talking about essentially how
long it took. Yeah,
how long it took. Yeah.
So basically, we shot just before COVID sort of all happened.
Oh, you shot before COVID?
Yeah, just before, man. I mean,
man, you dodged a bullet, bro. Man, that's insane.
I remember we were on set and it took. I think we shot about just close to 30 days, right?
Yeah.
And I remember we were I wasn't sleeping. I was just on set, sleep 3 hours, get back to it the next day. And people were talking about some virus, something was happening on the news. We didn't know what it was, you know?
Well, at that time, SARS had come up before, and you hear this stuff in the news, and you sort of brush that aside. You're like, and I didn't have time, background concern, not a forward concern.
It was background. We were on set, man. We had to get this thing done, and we just finished it, and then COVID pretty much kicked in and all that stuff. So we were we had a few pickup shots to do, which we had to wait another 6 months to a year to do. So that obviously delayed the film too. And then there was another 2 to 3 years in post-production, which brings us to this point of about 7 years now.
Well, it kind of works out for COVID post-production because you've got all the outdoor stuff done, and now you've got all the indoor stuff to do. So it's a bit of a blessing in a way.
Yeah, I had people helping with post-production that, all of a sudden, because of COVID and they lost work, they couldn't help on my film, so they had to go out and find their own work. Yeah. So it's like, I got thrown into the edit. I didn't want to do the edit, but my 2 editors that I did have, they gave me a really great framework to work with, so I didn't have to start from scratch.
Yeah.
We've gone with a few drafts of the film, and so they gave me a really good framework to work with, and I just had to spend the next 2 years editing myself part-time, 3 kids.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Man. Editing is time-consuming.
Yeah, man. And post-production supervisor too. I had to send out the VFX shots and get them done. And
so Ronnie, Streets of Colour, right? Yes. This is the film we're talking about here.
Yes.
Streets of Colour. Without giving too much away, what is Streets of Colour about? What is the framework? What is the backdrop for it?
The backdrop is at the core is racism. It's loosely based on my life. I grew up in the 80s as a kid and in the 90s as a teenager, and I unfortunately copped a lot of racism.
Yeah, okay.
And when you're growing up, maybe you think it's a little bit exaggerated because you're a kid, or you're raging hormones as a teenager and stuff. So
kids are cruel.
Kids are cruel. It's all good. It wasn't until I was an adult in my early 30s. I was actually in Penrith where I was living.
Yeah.
I had an altercation with, I think he was 15 or 13 years old. It was just like a neighbour who started just abusing racial slurs. There was some sort of...
Far out, dude.
Yeah, they were blocking the driveway. So I was living in this townhouse complex sort of thing. And,
I gotcha. It's got a little street that goes up inside it. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I was in the corner, so I could never get my car out, and there was an altercation or whatever.
Yeah, it's strange to say. I lived in one of those on Derby Street when I was going to uni, because you got to downsize going to uni, right? And I was in a townhouse. Parking was always a problem.
Yeah. So Derby's like Cox Avenue then.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So I was living on Cox Avenue, so a lot of those units are quite similar to the ones in Derby.
Yeah, it's like a horseshoe of units with a street up the middle of it. Well, not a street, a driveway.
Yeah, it's a driveway. Yeah, but I was right in the corner, so if anyone parked, there's no way of getting out.
Yeah.
At the time, my wife was pregnant and stuff. And, so I'm just asking them to move their car or whatever, and this young kid's just like abusing me with these really strong racial slurs. I couldn't believe my ears.
No, I got the picture, man. It sounds pretty caustic. Yeah,
skinny little kid. He was like, he barely was 13. I'm like, where would he get this sort of language from?
It was quite clear.
Yeah,
where he's getting it from.
I know, but like at that point, I thought I'd made peace with the whole what I was saying when I was a kid and stuff. I thought it was exaggerated or whatever, but it wasn't, because it was pretty brutal what I went through when I was as a kid, and then it just I was taken aback, like it was just brewing in me. I was like, I was angry, I was pissed off, I was I was like, this shit's still happening, and I guess that's where the film was born. It was born out of that one incident. I knew that maybe I didn't make peace with the racism that I copped.
Yeah, maybe this incident has brought that back to the surface.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I thought, maybe let's put pen to paper and see what happens. And so that's how Streets of Colour was born, out of that.
Yeah.
It started off being, let's tell a story about how I grew up and interwoven. Yeah, like with all the drugs and the violence and all that sort of stuff. Because you can't just tell a story about racism. I guess you got to, tell a story.
There's more framework to it than that.
Yeah. So I started writing this thing, and it developed into, scripts develop into other things. So it turned into this other thing, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. So, that's pretty much where it was born.
Well, it's interesting how a story can take form like that, because obviously you've had this spark that's highly emotive, right? Something that's core to your emotions, right? And a lot of people approach it differently. You could react in anger, and be angry back at the situation, and then attack the other as you have been attacked. You could do that, but it's a choice.
Yeah.
But what you've done instead of doing that is, what I'm going to do is invoke change.
Change, yeah. Educate, inspire, even and
through art.
And I've always thought, you don't really see movies coming out of Western Sydney, so I thought let's do something.
They're on the uptake though.
Hey?
They're on the uptake, man.
Finally.
Well, you were talking about diversity before, right? And another word I hear these days is inclusivity.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. They go hand in hand, don't they?
Well, when we show stuff at Made in the West, man, everyone comes up to us and goes, thank you so much for putting colour on screen. And I go, well, actually, I know that's what we are essentially doing, but that's not the reason we're doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
We're putting those movies up because they're good. Yeah. Well, it has nothing to do with ticking a box.
Yes, exactly.
It's a meritocracy. Like, Made in the West, its formula for judging films is the most honest. That we were set out to do it because we got fucked over by other film festivals.
That's right.
The nepotism and favoritism and friendships that obviously
Yep.
had influence in their decision making. And that's why we have a panel of judges that, you know, are from a vast background, 20 years experience plus between, you know,
Nice.
each of them. You know, we've got, you know, dropping now a bit of name dropping. We've got Brian Brown, you know, we've got a whole bunch of cool people there, man, that have documentary makers. We've got a guy that's a composer from the con, so he does the film composing judging, right?
Yeah.
We judge music videos, dramas, every genre you can think of, right? And if you don't like what the judges have said, you get the Audience Choice Award, so the audience can vote. Right? If you don't, and, you know, then I thought that was really important.
That's really smart.
Yeah, because then you go, well, you can read the bios on these judges and make your own decision. You can, you know, we have heaps of blogs, by the way. Check out our blogs; they're pretty good. And we write about this all the time, and I feel really appreciative that we've done it that way, because you know that it's real, and it's based off meritocracy. And if you work in Western Sydney, it's not. It's a very colourful place.
It is, yeah.
It's organically.
Organic, yeah, because people...
You don't have to try.
Because every time I'm doing these sort of things, you know, people go, oh, you've got a really diverse cast, and was that on purpose? And I'm like, no, that's just exactly the way
the story.
I grew up. We grew up this way, you know? It's not about ticking boxes or trying to be inclusive. And I mean, it was originally organically, like you said, like that.
So why not tell it that way?
Yeah.
Why do we have to superimpose these other ideas that aren't actually truthful to the story?
That's right, you know.
You know?
I mean, we do have a bit of creative license when we make films, you know. Like I say, it's loosely based on my experiences. If it didn't happen to me, it probably happened to somebody that I knew. Yeah. But it's actually quite authentic, you know.
Well, you hear stories like this all the time. Like, you know, I grew up in Campbelltown. I saw a lot of it.
Yeah.
But I saw, you know, a garden variety of violence. You know, I saw racial violence, and I saw, you know, violence of those that had strength against those that didn't have strength, or you know, a group violence where you had there's one group from this street and one group from that street. Yeah. You know, I saw, you know, and there was just those that were just crazy as well. I think they're the worst. They're unpredictable. So, you know, it's just us as humans, right? We do have these violent tendencies, especially in low social economical areas.
Yep, that's true.
And there's a sense of, you know, because I'm a white guy from Campbelltown, from an original, like, you know, poor Irish neighbourhood that then became multicultural. You know, I was at that tipping point.
When it was actually changing.
When it was changing. So my sisters that are older than me, they went through like this white poor neighbourhood that became a coloured poor neighbourhood. You know, and you knew what streets you're on because of the graffiti.
Yeah, sure.
Graffiti would change, you know, because the Lebanese guys would sort of stick together, the Vietnamese guys would stick together, the Islanders would stick together, and then, you know, there was us poor white guys that would stick together, you know. But when I went to school, though, man, it wasn't like there was a group of us that just didn't look at a lens like that. We were just friends, man.
Yeah, yeah.
No one gave a fuck where you come from or what what your sexual preference is. No one gave a shit. Yeah. And that was one cool thing about those neighborhoods, because all you had really, aside from the crazies and the violence of people, the normal people in the seams of that.
Yeah, of course.
Were very authentic.
Yeah.
You know, if you go to a pub in Penrith, man, like you might run into some crazy cats.
Oh, yeah.
But they're pretty real. Like, they're not faking that. They're not faking those attitudes, man. They're real. Yeah. And there is that. But there is that. There's two things I see that are sort of coupled with racism there. Or, you know, one thing really, and that's about the other. So when I was in some of these poor neighborhoods as a kid, everyone got along. But if an outsider came in, everyone knew. Like, because you could see, usually noticed by the car. Like, I remember this salesman came up to our house, right?
Right.
And because it's housing commission area, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he's selling double glazed windows, and my mother says to him, he goes, "Do you know where you are right now?" And she's like,
Wrong
he's like,
demographic.
"What do you mean?" He goes, "You're not going to sell any of this here.
Yeah.
Where's your car?" And she goes, "Oh," he goes, "It's down the road." She goes, "What do you drive?"
Oh,
He goes, "It's an SS Commodore." And she goes, "Well, if you go down there and your car's not there, you can come back up here and use the phone. Half hour later, he comes back,
Oh,
going,
no
my
way.
car's gone.
His car's gone.
Yeah, I'm like, man, you don't just because he's an outsider.
Yeah, exactly.
And then everyone goes,
That's
oh,
where he is. Yeah.
well, they took him for a ride, right? They took his car. He's like, he didn't get mugged.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's just the way the neighbourhood was. But that same attitude of the other is also embedded into the neighbourhood when there's dispute. And anything that could be identified as different, anything from long hair even back in the day. You know, if you were long hair...
Very true. Hey, earrings, tats.
Yeah, tattoos, earrings, anything that is different. And racism is definitely included in that, you know. And I think, it is a shame because you go, surely we're moving on from this bullshit.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was saying. You know, I was in my early 30s when I started like writing this thing, or it was even mid 30s probably. And
Time flies.
Time flies, man. I'm saying 7 years, but you know, if I do the math, it was probably mid 30s that it happened. And I never really I mean, I always wanted to tell a story about growing up in Western Sydney. I mean, racism was going to be part of it, but wasn't going to be the prominent idea or theme of the film, like it is now. And
more subtext rather than context.
Yeah, exactly. And like I was saying, you know, writing the script over the 3 years, it developed into something that I didn't, you know, I thought I was going to write this cool gangster film. Growing up in
everyone wants to do the Guy Ritchie Tarantino gangster movie, and you want to make it Western Sydney-esque.
Exactly.
I know exactly the feeling.
Because there's a lot of culture in Western Sydney, whereas, you know,
you want to show off a bit.
You want to show off a little bit, and you want to like create a window into what it's like in Western Sydney. Because every time I used to go to film events, in the city, of course, because that's where they all are. People would say, what's it like in Western Sydney? I've never been out there, because, I mean, no one needs to really go out there if you have no business to do out there, and if you don't live out there, right? If you don't work out there.
Yeah, why would you go out there?
So, you know, every time I'd heard that over the years, and when I went to film school many years ago, and people would freak out, you're from Western Sydney, you're probably the only person at film school from Western Sydney. And I'm talking about a time where there was probably like 2 film schools in the whole of Sydney. That's showing my age now. You know, it was our afters and probably one other one that I went to, which was sort of a low grade.
Is it SAE or SAE?
No, SAE was a sound school at the time.
A sound school,
I think they did exist at the time. We're talking mid to late 90s now. Sydney Film School didn't exist. There was one TAFE in the whole of New South Wales, North Sydney TAFE. Very competitive. Tried to get in there for like 3 years in a row.
Wow.
Had to sit in a hall with like 300 other people, and of course, I dare say there was, you know, systemic racism when it came to that sort of thing back in the day.
Or even subconscious racism.
Yeah, subconscious, and there was even postcode racism as well. You know, as soon as they see your postcode and they go, "Where's this guy from?"
That is a thing, man. I'm telling you, it's a thing. I've seen it plenty of times. Less these days, but when I started in this business, man, it was a big problem.
Yeah, even going for job interviews, I had to leave my postcode off.
Don't put your address on there.
Yeah, putting your address on there. You know? And now people are putting photos up there, you know. So for people like myself, I don't know if it was something that I would do, but.
I find it depends what industry. You know, I work a lot in the university sector.
Right.
They don't give a shit. Like, they really don't. Like, they love it ticking a box. Don't get me wrong. They love ticking a box. Yeah. But at the end of the day, as long as you're productive, they don't really care. And there's some corporate sectors that I've worked in as well. They just don't care either. But there's some that do. They just do. I don't know why. It's just a thing.
And in saying all this stuff, I mean, we've talked about racism for a fair bit of the time now. But
that's all right.
It's definitely getting better. I'm not saying it's more prevalent or it's a huge problem. I'm just saying that this is what I've experienced, and I just wanted to tell a story about it. And if people are still suffering from it, then maybe they can take something away from it.
Yeah, or perhaps even be reflective in their own right. You know, I think that's a big thing as well. People just being reflective about it. And as I say, I think racism is the residual effect of other problems.
100%. You
know, there's more. It's more core to that. It's really to the human condition about what is the other. Because you're not born racist, you know. If you look how kids interact, they don't.
No, they don't see color.
They don't see color. They don't see it that way at all. It's not in the lexicon, man.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that is what is adapted over the frameworks and hierarchies in society.
Yep. And
you got to look to that. And if you look at it, it gets quite ugly after a while. Like, you know, there's that saying, you know, I just want to be normal, or if only I could be normal. But then you analyze what normal is. And normal is quite horrific when you analyse it. Like, it's normal to go and bomb a country on the other side of the world because of a conflict that they're having between themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
That's normal.
Yeah.
It's normal for, an insurance company to rip 60,000 people off of their pension because they made some poor bets in the housing market.
Yeah,
that's normal.
Yeah. So what does normal mean? Hey.
Yeah, it's not. Normal is police overacting in their authority. It's normal to be on hold with Centrelink, and be told, and even perhaps even being told you're a thief or it's not your fault, that it's not their fault you got scammed. It's someone else's fault that you got scammed, right? That's normal. So what you learn is that normal is a raging psychopath, and that doesn't sound like something I want to be. I'm an emotional being that cares about his fellow. You know, I don't want to be normal. If that's normal, I'm not interested.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make because, like we said, what is normal, and that brings you back to the film again because the main character, he wants to be essentially normal.
Yeah,
he wants to assimilate. He wants to be an Aussie. He wants to be an Anglo. He wants to, if you've seen the poster and the trailers, you'll see that he's got blonde hair. He's got blue contacts. Because that's what we did back in the day, man. We just wanted to assimilate. We just wanted to be, included into the circles. We didn't want to be segregated. And like you said, there was always a nice pool of people who didn't see color, man. And I grew up with those guys too. Unfortunately, it was a very small little circle, because they were even segregated by the people who were the racists or whatever.
Yeah, then they got their own combatants because of their persuasion in life.
Exactly, So we just wanted to be normal. We wanted to assimilate. And, people say, maybe immigrants don't come over here and they try to assimilate. We did. We tried to assimilate because we were born here, all of us. A lot of us, people from
immigrants, man. Second generation Australians, first Australians.
So it was always hard to, what is normal, because you've got this culture, you speak a different language, and you got a religion, you got all this sort of stuff that comes with being from immigrant parents, but you also want to be the cool Aussie. You want to go out and do everything that Aussies do. You know what I mean? So you're stuck in these two worlds, and that's what Streets of Colour is. It doesn't just cover racism. It's about culture. It's about identity. It's about if you believe in something like religion. We cover a lot of topics: friendship, loss.
Yeah. Man, I think identity's a big one, for people.
Man.
Identity's
especially
a big
these
one.
days, right?
Yeah, it really is. Identity.
We were grappling with it back in the 90s, We didn't know who we were.
Oh, dude, I watched a documentary that really affected me in a strange way about the 90s. Really? Yeah, because we're talking about the 90s, essentially, because it was a rough time, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It was a pretty violent decade.
Yeah, but one of my favourite eras.
Oh, man, so much came out of it, right? Because you got to understand, the 90s was the last decade of analog.
Yes.
It was the last decade. It was the swan song of analog, man.
100%.
And this, if you want to understand the contrast between that analog journey, go to 1969 Woodstock and have a look what happened. Everyone's on acid, listening to this music and having a great time. Make love, not war. The hippie movement, right? Yes. And there's always been the military-industrial complex button up against the hippie movement.
Yeah, that's it.
Steve Jobs is the kind of guy who wants to put 1,000 songs in your pocket. And Zuckerberg is the kind of guy that wants to put a listening device in your pocket, right? So you've got these two butting heads, right? Yeah. And the hippie movement in the 60s was one of those blows to the establishment where people realised we are actually born free. We should be allowed to listen to this music. Heavy metal isn't the devil, it's just Halloween, right? There's realities to it that are
devil
blown.
Music, they kept calling it.
Devil music.
Remember Metallica?
It was all devil's music, right? But if you go to 1999 Woodstock, it's a different deal. They didn't have rubbish clean. I challenge anyone to watch this documentary. It's called Woodstock 1999.
Okay.
And it gives you the contrast of what the difference between the 60s and the 90s were, right?
Nice.
The 90s made the 60s look like the 50s, right?
Wow.
If you think about it. Because the violence that was going on in 1999, like Fight Club was the most popular movie.
Yes.
Pulp Fiction was a popular movie. These are violent films that really tune into the ego within us that is a violent person.
Yes.
If you look at misogyny in the 90s, it was totally accepted.
It is, yeah.
It was totally accepted. Like smacking a chick on the ass was acceptable. Like if you go do that now, you're in trouble.
Yes.
I'm not advocating that's what I want to go and do, but what I'm pointing out is that in the 90s, that was just a normal thing.
And it's funny when you looked at these films now, hey, and you go, that was allowed. That was okay back then.
Yeah. Yeah, it was totally acceptable. Like, there's films that were made then that you could not make now.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I reckon that the 90s, I've seen stabbings, I've witnessed shootings. That was before I was in the military.
Yeah.
That was in Campbelltown. What used to bug me as well, because I used to watch the news, and none of these stories would be in the news. You go, this is surely newsworthy. But they never reported on Western Sydney suburb crime. They never reported on it. They still don't. They only report on it in the not even a voyeuristic sense, just a pointing down sense. Just like look at that over there, pointing down at it.
Yep.
And you know, it's the '90s was a crazy decade.
It was,
It
man.
really
I mean,
was.
I went to a high school in the 90s that was always on the news. We were always on like Today Tonight or A Current Affair because of the racial violence and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
You know, people who had graduated or not even graduated, just left the school would come back to the school when there was some sort of fight. You know, people would bring in, you know, the older guys to come in and there'd be
I've witnessed
fights
stuff like that happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the school would be this like big brawl and like, I mean, this was real, you know. So between then and say, you know, the late 2000s, I think the Western Sydney area was already demonized by the media, and I think up until now we still have a really bad name because anytime you mention the name Mount Druitt, I mean,
you got an image straight away.
There's always negative connotations.
Well,
to
they're even
it,
trying to
man.
ban music from Mount Druitt, man.
You've seen what happened with 1-4 and
yeah, man.
Yeah, man, you know,
it's crazy what they're doing. They're trying to ban them. Like, that's what I mean. They're back to that thing again, right? They go, we've got to ban this music because it is invoking violence. I'm like, you got to think about where the music's coming from, man. It's not the music that's creating the violence, man. There's a background issue to that.
There is, yeah.
It's more deep than the songs
complicated.
they're making.
Yeah, but it gets a little bit complicated because a lot of these guys are, you know, on the wrong side of the law and all that sort of stuff too. So
Totally.
I guess it's a case by case sort of study when you look at these things.
Yeah, but you can't shut down art, man. You can't.
No, you
do
can't.
that.
I mean, it's freedom of speech. But you know, I dare say that, you know, I tried to get my film into film festivals across the world, and I dare say that there's a lot of controversial topics within Streets of Colour.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe I don't know. Maybe have I crossed a few lines? Am I being too authentic? I mean,
hopefully
the racial, but but you were saying like there was things that we could do back in the 90s that we can't do now. And I do feel that festivals or festival directors who have seen my film have not included it because there is too much political.
It's too touchy.
It's too touchy. There's a lot of strong language and. It was really confronting having to shoot some of these scenes, and you know, I had to make sure the actors were okay, and you could see, like, even though these actors are potentially just acting, there was a realness to what they were saying. It was quite authentic that you could see now that the actors were actually being affected by the words that were said.
Well, that's what they do, right? That's what actors do. They get involved.
But you can see even the actors. I could see, like, you know, I'm watching the monitor, and then we yell cut, and then you can see the other actor going off and making sure that the other actor's okay, and then I'd have to take off my headphones and go and like, is everyone okay? And like that, like, I didn't realize. I mean, when I was writing it on the page, I knew it was very confronting. I knew it was going to be a little bit controversial. I knew it was going to be a little bit hard to watch for some people who have been through that. But I didn't realize until I stepped on set and I saw the effect it was having on the actors that I was like, whoa, okay, maybe we do have something pretty strong here. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I guess when the film's released, I guess maybe you can tell me too if you think it's too confronting or.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll definitely give you an opinion on it, man. But I reckon.
Like, have I gone too far? I don't know. Like, I'm just trying to be authentic. I mean,
I think you could be able to get it out there. You just got to get it to the right festival. There's a whole range of festivals out there. I've talked about this with a lot of people
there's
several
like
times.
4,000 festivals across the world, right?
Yeah.
You can jump on Film Freeway and like you don't know which ones are good and which ones are, you know, the low
Well,
tier,
there's consultants you can hire actually.
Yeah,
there are consultants you can hire. I recommend a good guy to talk to would be Matty Vella actually.
Oh yeah, I know Matt.
Yeah. He knows a lot about it. He does a lot of he's done a lot of festivals.
Yeah.
But yeah, features are a bit different. Because you know there's lower selection rates for the festivals.
Yeah, especially because of the length, right?
Because they're long form content,
and we get that too. We get that's length, and like I said, the political stuff too. And you know, I think we're at the stage now where we're not really looking at doing the festival run anymore because we've got distribution now. So we don't really need to.
Man, just get it up on stand, mate. You'll be right.
Yeah. Well, that's the plan. By October, everything should be online, anyways.
Yeah.
So I'm told, but. Yeah, like I feel like it didn't connect with any audiences. I mean, it didn't connect with any festivals. Sorry, to even get to an audience, but which was a little bit sad for the film. But you know, we got the world premiere coming up, so that's quite exciting. And
well, we got the world premiere coming up
and a limited release.
Where is this film coming out? When can we see it?
Monday, June 26th. Monday, June the 26th. It's a Monday night, unfortunately for some people, but and it's at the Cremorne, Hayden Orpheum Cremorne.
Yep.
7:00.
That's an awesome cinema. I love that cinema.
It is. It's a great cinema. It's been my lifelong dream. Ever since. I mean, my whole life has been about film, but. I think it was back in the 90s that I'd seen a film there, and I was like, wow, I'd love to have my film play at this one day, because
It's mad, dude.
yeah, it's so cool. You know, I saw I think it was the 50th anniversary of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. One of my favorite films.
I love that film. Yeah, that's my ringtone.
Yeah,
it's my ringtone on my phone.
I had that on my my ringtone for years. And I saw that there, and I was just like, one day, yeah, I've got to do this, you know. And so, who knows? This might be my last film, you know. So
Nah, I don't
go
think
out,
so,
go
man.
out with a bang.
I don't think so, man. I think the promotion you're doing for it looks mad online. The poster looks fantastic.
Thank you, man.
It looks authentic as, man. Like I can't wait to see it. But yeah, and especially that venue, man. That is a majestic cinema, man.
It is.
And the angle in that cinema is very steep.
Yes.
It's a very steep. It's like old school. They don't make them like that anymore.
No,
They're
they
sort
don't.
of more leveled out.
Yeah, they are leveled out.
Yeah, yeah. When you're walking through the stairs, don't have too many beers. Be careful in that cinema.
I think I'll have a few before I get started.
Oh yeah, you're gonna have a few for the nerves, man.
Yeah,
a few for the
man.
nerves.
Oh, yeah.
Are you going to give a bit of a speech before you
I'm not really
roll
sure,
it?
but we usually do a quick intro, and we're doing a Q&A afterwards as well with a
Yeah.
couple of the actors, so it should be quite good.
Yeah, I reckon you should, man. Get up there and
Yeah.
say, "Well, look, this is why I made this movie."
Yeah, no, we're definitely
You
doing
know,
that.
and
yeah.
I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys have a good time. We'll talk to you at the end. You know, you should give them a bit.
I sort of did that. We had a cast and crew screening last year,
Yeah.
and sort of did an intro for that. Didn't do a Q&A, of course, because it was just the cast and crew, just to say thank you to everyone for contributing. I had up to 300 people working on this thing,
Yeah,
so it was a big thank you to them to have see the film on a big screen, and
Yeah.
now the big red carpet premiere. So
yeah, man. Yeah, at the Hayden Orpheum.
yeah, man.
Yeah, man, that's fucking boss. Man, I'm
Jeez,
I'm a bit jealous, man. I've always wanted to do a
You got to
movie
come
there.
down, man.
Yeah, I've had a few mates that have released features there, man.
Yeah, it's
and,
cool.
Because I've got my feature idea, or I've got a book idea that I want to turn into a feature,
Right.
essentially. But and again, I can tell you what it is. Actually, I can tell you a little bit of it. I call it the undercover rock star.
Cool.
And it's about
Idea.
because I'd go to war and then go join a band. I'd get back home and go straight into a band. That's how I do it. I did that for 15 years.
Wow.
You know, so I've been a heavy metal singer for 25 years now. Played. I think I worked it out. It was 150 shows or something like that
That's
I've
pretty
done.
cool, man.
Yeah, it blew me mind. I'm like, shit, that's a lot of singing. That's a lot of singing.
Is that the band name there?
Oh no. This is
I can't see what it
Manga.
says.
This is Manga. Yeah,
Oh,
Canada.
okay.
What is it? Ghost in the not Ghost in the Shell. Oh, I can't believe
Mind
it.
blank.
Akira. It's
Oh,
Akira.
Akira, yeah.
Yeah, it's Akira.
I've come across Akira.
But yeah, no,
no,
my last band was Mendoza. The one before that was Alpha Degenerate. A lot of fun. I
Cool.
do miss it. COVID put our lights out, unfortunately. A few
As
things
always,
did.
yeah.
Oh, our drummer left town, and that was the end of it. Because we had a studio.
There's always someone that breaks up the band, right?
Yeah, usually it's a girl. This time it wasn't a girl. Usually
Yeah.
it's a girl who breaks up a band. Most bands I've been in have been broken up by a girl.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Because they want to go off and have a family, or
Yeah, whatever it is. It's usually because you got to understand being in a band is like having a girlfriend.
right.
But as well, like being in a film crew is like having a girlfriend as well, man. Like I really noticed the correlation between bands and film crews
Yeah,
because
definitely.
cinematographer's a guitarist. The attitude's the same. Director's a vocalist. A drummer is an editor. There's those roles are very similar to that of a
Right.
band. But the only the cool difference I like between being in film crews and bands you perform live, right? Film crew, you make the film, and then all you got to do is go and watch the movie at different venues.
We're lucky that
It's
way.
way easier to do the gig. The gig, you've already done it. The gig's just got to be replayed. You have to don't perform it again.
I guess if it was live, it would be theater, right? So
Yeah, not my bag.
different animal. Yeah, not my bag either.
I haven't done that one before.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. But so what got you into film, man? Like, so you were talking before you were working for film companies. In the 90s, you got inspired. We were talking off air before. Like, you've done projection and
Yeah. It's always been in my blood, man. I've told this story a few times. I try to tell it differently, but yeah. So you got some new content for your viewers. But like, I can recall, man, being like a 4-year-old kid,
yeah.
growing up in the 80s, and just plugging in these Betamax tapes into my parents' machine and just recording like Star Wars, Superman. I still got the tapes till this very day.
Oh, wow.
The Channel 10 commercials from back in the day.
Yeah,
Still
wow.
got them. I kept them, and I had a huge collection, and I always knew there was something about storytelling that I loved.
Yeah.
So I wasn't the kid that went out and did sports and all that sort of stuff. you know, I was just like glued to that screen, you know, glued. So all throughout the 80s, 90s, that's all I ever did. I'd get my, you know, parents to take me over to the video store and rent like 10 weeklies, or usually horror films. You know, those great
dollar horror films,
yeah, the dollar ones. And then so like I didn't do any sports whatsoever. I was just like stuck in my bedroom with my VHS machine and my small little Sony TV that I remember.
Yeah.
And that's all I would do. And I would do film reviews. I would like get it like a pad and a paper, and I would even write like the director's name, DOP, and like I was into who's the executive producer. I'd rate it out of 10. So I always knew that I would somehow get into filmmaking, right? But growing up in Western Sydney, right, those opportunities weren't there.
It's unattainable, especially in that point of history. It's unattainable.
We're talking like early 90s now, right? When I was in high school. And it wasn't until, I couldn't believe it, it was like 1993 or something. I was in year 10 or year 9. They introduced the first film and video elective class. Yeah. And I was like, that's for me. And I did that for like year 9 and year 10, excelled at it. And that's when I knew that was my first sort of education into, you know, this is pre-internet, of course. Yeah. And I knew that this is something that I definitely want to do. I wasn't going to go to uni like my parents wanted me to do. And like back then, communications wasn't really heavy on film. It wasn't. I mean, film was probably one little subject, but it wasn't something that you could do at uni to become a filmmaker. Yeah,
you could do media production as you can do it now.
No, you couldn't do anything. So, like I was saying, I think earlier, I was mentioning that. There was only one TAFE in the whole of New South Wales, believe it or not. North Sydney TAFE were the only one that had a film and TV certificate course, and I think they had maybe 2 different ones. Like you did the first one, and then like certificate 2, and then you had to do certificate 3. And that was very competitive. Couldn't get into that. 2-3 years I tried. Afters, you had to be 21 and over. You had to be a mature age student back in and that's when it was over at North Ryde at the Macquarie University back in those days. So couldn't get into that, and you know, I think I ended up finding some private little college run in Artarmon, and it was one day in Artarmon, one day in Redfern. Yeah. Did that. It wasn't the best course, but it was something, you know, that, you know, started me off into having some sort of framework and, you know, stills photography and doing all that stuff. Yeah. And, you know, so I always had video cameras, you know, that my dad always had video cameras around. He used to shoot weddings on these massive, big Betamax cameras.
Yeah, Betamax camera.
Where you had to actually carry the big recorder with you on your shoulder. And it was quite heavy. Still got it to this very day. So I used that to make short films with my friends when I was like 6 or 7 years old. I still got those little recordings as well. And I used to do stop animation and all sorts of stuff. So I was the guy in high school that always carried the video camera around. Yeah. Like I filmed pretty much everything we did. All the bad shit, all the good shit, everything. You know?
Yeah, I did that as well.
Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about, you know? Like I was that dude. I was that nerdy film geek guy, you know, the non-athletic type, and all my friends thank me now because I've got all that stuff documented, you know, and
I wish I still had all that stuff. I don't have any of that stuff.
Well, that's what I do for now for a living. I digitize things. I digitize 8mm film and slides and all sorts of stuff. That's sort of like my side hustle.
Side hustle.
Yeah. So
well, everyone needs a side hustle, right?
No, you do. You know, you got to survive, man. I pretty much, apart from the first 3 years before I got made redundant working for a film company, which I'll get to as well. Yeah. I haven't earned anything making this film, you know, so I've had to have a side hustle, you know, but I couldn't have a full-time job at the same time because then the film would have taken another 2-3 years. Yeah. So it's like, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, you got to survive.
Yeah, you got to jump out somehow, you know. Like, but that's I have the same. Every artist has the same problem, right? Like, even running the Pagey train, right? To run this podcast,
it's the starving artist syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the Pagey train doesn't make any money, right? Yeah. But I take the gear and go and make money with it. Yeah, you know, so I go do streaming services, I do VTR as well, so videotape recording, so remote recording. Oh, very cool. So, you know, they hook in a radio transmitter to a camera, and I can remote HD.
Oh, cool.
So they can do stunts and stuff, and do weird camera stuff that you could normally do with the record, you know, with capturing the data. But you're gonna need those side hustles, man. But, actually, I've got to pause. I've got to go to the loo.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, I'll be back.
Older gets worse, right? Like, as soon as I hit my 40s, man, like, I don't know what it was, but I was just like, every night I get woken up on my bladder, then I can't get back to sleep.
Yeah, I haven't got it that bad just yet.
Oh,
but,
okay, so stop complaining then.
No, it's about when I get the urge, I have to go.
Oh yeah.
when the
I hate that.
I can't hold it. I have to go.
Yeah.
It's really.
Sorry to put you through that pain, man. I know it's hard when I'm
Oh,
talking. And
well, yeah, no, you don't want to. You want to get to the end of the
point. You
point.
can do a sign if you want. Like you say, cut.
No. Oh no, just pause it. I always take toilet breaks with it. I try not to fight it, especially when we do like there's other episodes I do where we drink a whole bunch of beer, and we end up drinking a 6-pack between us on some episodes.
Yeah, I've seen you drinking on a couple. Hey.
Yeah. We do different episodes for different things.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, but but it all comes back to the side hustle, man. Yeah. Like I love my side hustles.
It seems like you got a few side hustles going.
Heaps. I've got heaps of them. So do VOs, do ADR, do
How
editing.
do you get into all that? Like,
just piece by piece. Because someone, there's always someone that goes, man, do you know someone that does this? And you go, oh, this other person's busy. And they go, well, I kind of know how to do it, so I'll do it for
that too. Yeah.
I'll do a better rate for you. I won't do a full rate. I'll just do this little rate on it.
That's exactly what I do.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm going to charge full rate on that next time because I'm actually good at that. So, that's kind of how it happens,
Yeah.
It all started for me. I was working at a TV station. I started working at Television Sydney.
Right.
I started as an intern and I ended up becoming the station manager.
Oh, wow.
I went all the way through.
Yeah.
And, you end up doing, because it's community TV, you end up doing everything. So, you're an editor, you're a news producer.
And it's great learning, isn't it?
Yeah, you're a host. You did hostings and, did a whole bunch of stuff. I produced a few TV shows.
Nice.
And you learn everything about that. And then in the background of that, you're making movies.
Yeah.
And then running a festival.
It's very cool what you're doing, man.
Yeah,
very
well,
cool.
it wasn't a plan. I can tell you that. There's no plan.
That's good, man. Well, that's the best way sometimes, right?
Well, the only plan was about the festival. I'll say that. There was a plan to the festival. There's still a plan to the festival. Right. Creating the network, identifying the industry, solidifying the industry, being a component of that. That is definitely a plan. But my own journey has not had a plan. Like, I went to university. I didn't want to go to make film.
Right.
Because I was a musician, man. I wanted to go and be a Foley artist. I wanted to go do sound for film.
But was the band the first dream? Like, the dream.
Yeah.
When you were a kid, like, mate, I'm going to be a rock star. I'm gonna,
when you're a kid, you want to be a rock star, but then you go and play gigs and you start getting in the music industry, you realise the reality of it. Like, the weight of the world will crush your shoulders, as they say.
Well, that's what I feel like with filmmaking, right? Like everyone, growing up, it was the same thing. People go, oh, you're going to be a filmmaker. You're going to, go off and go to film school, are you? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
In Australia, you're in the wrong country.
Yeah, totally in the wrong country.
It still feels that way all these years later. Like, it's been 25 years since I went to film school.
Yeah, it does. It does feel that way.
But I just can't get rid of that dream. It's so hard to get it out of my system.
Well, that's where passion comes into it, because people go, we were talking about it before, people want to go and get funding for movies. They want to go do this and do that. 3 years into artistic pursuit, like for instance, the first hardest thing you have to do as an artist is actually identify as one. You have to say, I'm a filmmaker. I'm a storyteller. Yeah. I'm a digital artist. That's what I do.
But it's always hard when it's you got a full-time job to go to, and then that's your side. It's almost like a hobby almost.
Yeah. Well, there's a fine line, right?
It is a fine line.
Because then you can because then I'd work in the industry, and then I'd go and do then I'd go do like other commercial contracts that had nothing to do with the film industry. And then I do mixes of them. Like I started managing studios. Now I manage buildings because they go, you're really good at managing the studio. Do you want to manage buildings? I'm like, okay, I can do that. But then I've got the flexibility in that to still pursue my side hustles, which is the business. And I never thought, like, for instance, now we're proprietary limited. I never thought I'd become a proprietary limited company. Yeah. When do you ever think that as a
you don't.
Independent contractor?
I pretty much started my company with a PTY Ltd because it was necessary to create the film. I had to have that. But I never planned to have a production company.
It's not a plan.
It was never the plan.
It's never part of the plan.
I'm going to make a film. Someone's going to hire me. I'm going to make it in Hollywood. And
if you think you're going to go and make money. The irony is, this is the paradox, man. If you try and go and make money, you probably won't make it. Yeah. If you go and try and tell stories, eventually you'll start making money.
And that's what I'm telling everyone.
I've
never done this for money, ever.
Well, that's where the passion is. And 3 years into artistic pursuit, so the first thing to identify is yourself as an artist. And then you pursue that for 3 years, and you realise, I've had so many no's. So many people have told me no. And I've only... my last movie was a flop, and this one was okay. And you go, well, you just got to keep going, man.
Yeah, you do.
You just got to keep going. If you're passionate, you keep going. Like, there's that old saying, fake it till you make it.
Yeah, that's it.
And then at one point you go, when have I made it? But then I realised, what is making it?
Yeah, and what is faking it?
Were you faking it
really?
Were you actually faking it?
Yeah.
And look, when I was doing music, we got our stuff on the radio, got on TV, air quotations.
Hey,
made it.
Made it, exactly.
Still poor as fuck,
Made it.
Yeah, made it. Yeah, but in people's minds, when you think that you've made it, they attach money to it. They go, if you've made it,
it's a value, isn't it?
Yeah, you must be therefore rich.
Yeah,
that's not true. Because it costs you a fortune to make art, man.
It does.
That's why you got to have a side hustle and a job to pay for it.
Yep.
So if you're not passionate, those things won't come into alignment. I guess the other way I look at it, as the worker, it's the escape plan, man. I'm in prison and I'm anti-defraining it, and I'm digging a fucking tunnel through a really thick wall.
Nice reference there.
Andy Dufresne's my hero.
Oh, mate, it's that film is always on the top 100, and it comes up as always the number one.
Yeah,
most
Stephen King.
loved film. Yeah, it's Stephen King. People don't realize it's Stephen King. It's like totally different to what he does.
Yeah, he had a pseudonym for it. He didn't put his name on it. It was Steve Buckham or something like that. Buckham, something like that. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. Like I figured that out 10, 12 years ago, because I left my job, went to university. I'm going to go into the film industry. Wanted to be a sound engineer.
Because you did that later in life, right? Going to uni,
Yeah, I was 30 when I went to uni. 29, yeah. Wow. And I went to university to get a communications degree so I can do Foley. And
so Foley was the new dream.
Yeah, I wanted to go and do because I love film Foley. I love the sound in films.
Do they still do a lot of Foley? I mean,
I
didn't do any on ours.
Yeah, I do Foley.
Yeah,
I do Foley. I've done Foley for a lot of films.
Oh, cool, man.
Yeah, I've got a box of trinkets. I do it right here.
I've done it myself too on my last feature. So yeah,
I do the footsteps.
It's fun,
I do a
isn't
lot. I do footsteps. I do jackets coming off couches. I've actually built full sound beds, man. So because normally you have a guide track. Like you get a somewhat of what the sound sounds like, but I've been given films before where totally naked of sound. And build it from scratch, literally from scratch, and then you show people. Like even one of my, I'll show you this. This will spin you out, man. Let me pull this up while we're talking about this. I did my flagship clip for the year is Made in the West, right? The Made in the West highlights reel. So I interview everyone on the red carpet. Everyone gets their 15 seconds of fame, and everyone shares it, right? So if I go, there's one of these clips that I made. There it is. There. Okay. So hold on. I'll make that on. Some volume. Okay. So when I made this clip, this is 2020, right, during the pandemic. When I made this clip, the producer didn't push the record button on the sound device. So all I had was camera mic. Okay? Oh, no. And this is my flagship clip. It's worth minimum 10 grand, right? It's hard to calculate it, what it's worth, but if you think about the advertising and the draw for your next festival, and I've got 8 years of these clips, but one was going to be missing, and it bugged me.
It bugged you that much?
It bugged me.
No one would have noticed except you.
Well, they would. No, they would have. Yeah, no, you would have. The camera mic was. You're in a room full of people.
I mean, if you didn't use the clip.
Yeah, if I didn't use the clip, no one would notice, but I would know.
Yeah.
But you kind of lose momentum. It's about momentum as well. You lose that momentum.
No.
So if you look at, let me just whack this up. This is all ADR sound built from the ground up. So this is all ADR.
The whole thing.
The whole thing, and the sound design.
Welcome to the 2020 Made in the West Film Festival. Hosted by Still Searching Productions, this annual event is all about celebrating and showcasing our Western Sydney
ADR.
Work. Yeah, you can't tell.
Let's go take a look.
Nothing worse than really bad ADR, even in stuff on Netflix and that, and you just think, come on, guys. So,
it's rubbery mouth, right?
Yeah.
So I got everyone I interviewed, I got them into the studio and recorded their voices, and all the cocktail sounds you hear in the background, all soundscape.
Nice.
I built the whole thing. I even did their footsteps. So it's all... I even did Foley for this.
You can't tell. No one will ever be able to pick that.
Oh, you'll be out. There's a few that are a bit rubbery.
Mate?
Yeah, it's me.
I didn't recognise you.
There's a little bit rubbery there. A little bit rubbery. So essentially,
Oh, look, if you're going to watch it and then rewind it, you might pick up a few little things, but I doubt it. Oh, yeah.
It's actually better than what I would have recorded, which is the weird part about it, right?
Well done.
Yeah, man. So
Okay.
yeah, I just
Now I know who to come to.
I do ADR. I do a lot of repair work for people. So usually when people build their soundscape, sometimes they would have had a mic drop out.
Yeah.
It's a windy day. And they didn't have their dialogue, so then they go, we need to do the ADR. And when you go and they'll go do their own ADR, but it'll stick out because it will sound different from the rest of the film.
Yeah.
So I'll get their film and then they'll go, man, can you smooth this out? I said, actually, if you let me redo that little segment, I can make it sound like the rest of your film. I can smooth it out for you. So I smooth them out. So I show them, when I show the people before and afters of my repairs, they go, man, it's like you can't see the seam. And that's the art of it, is you've got to remove the seam and make it blend.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of tricks you can do to make that happen. So yeah, ADR is a passion. Foley is a passion.
Okay.
Like to make a good sword sound, a good cake lifter. I recommend a good cake lifter.
Yep.
And a fork, like ping. Right?
Nice.
Actually, I should look up. I've got some really good footage of me doing it.
All right. Cool.
Because it's the thing I like about Foley is you are reacting the film.
Yeah, you are.
You're doing all the physical blocking, reacting in the sound space.
Fun.
Look, it is fun.
Yeah.
It's time consuming, but it's fun.
Yeah.
So that's one of the services I do. I do.
Cool.
I already mentioned the streaming services, so I do a lot of that for corporate. So a lot of insurance companies that make commercials, I stream the content to all the people that are building it.
Very cool.
Podcast, and we shoot short form documentary mainly. That's our main bread and butter at the moment, which is a lot of fun. But let me just
Do it all, mate.
I do it all, man. And I do voiceovers as well. So I do like.
Yeah, you got a good voice for it.
Yeah, I do. I've got a good rural voice, so I've done a lot of farm stuff. Like.
Can you do more of it?
Oh yeah, no. Well, what you do is you take the CB radio and you go to channel 2.
That's the one.
But actually, I show
you
you
do a bit of an Ocker one.
Yeah, I'll show you my.
How you going, mate?
Yeah, well, I got my American movie guy as well.
Oh, nice.
I'll do that one. Hold on.
You mean the trailer guy?
Yeah, I got a trailer guy. Come on, allow. Come on, get out of the way. Come here. YouTube. On YouTube. I'll show you that. This will blow your mind. Come on, buddy. No? Okay. Just go.
Just go.
Jesus. It's been that's not
NBN
me.
here?
Oh, there it is. Hey?
You got NBN here?
Yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah, no, it's just me being,
Impatient.
impatient and having terrible... Why aren't you working, dude? What are you doing? Batteries are dying.
Battery. Yeah,
batteries are dying.
To me.
This old school keyboard.
Hey, you can't go wrong with wide keyboard.
Yeah, it's an old wide Mac keyboard. There we go. There's my old channel. That's what I was up to. Now I forgot what I was looking for. Now I can... Shh. Silent surfing. Yeah, here it is. Here we go. You'll like this one. This is one of my VOs. Back in the TV days.
The woman she thought was her mother.
That's you.
That's me.
And now they're after her. This Wednesday, Television Sydney presents The Fast and the Furious. Let's go for a little ride. Wait.
I didn't route it. Silly
Not
boy.
that, The Fast and the Furious.
Is that you too?
The Fast and
Yeah.
the Furious.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I changed it over, and so
Yeah,
it's
you
all
couldn't even
serious.
tell it was the same person.
Not that, The Fast and the
There you go.
Furious.
Very cool.
I look for my horror one. The horror one's the best. Horror ones were funny.
This is like a real, is it?
Yeah. Where's the horror one? Horror.
Wednesday on Television Sydney.
It's not that one.
How far would you go to become
How far would you go
This is taking me back, man. Shit.
this summer?
this summer? Michelle Pfeiffer and murder.
Oh, mate. You know what? I always wanted to get into voice acting, but I don't have a good voice for it. So.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, man.
It's
It is. I do
I do
enjoy
it
it.
at home in front of the missus and the kids and stuff, and they just think I'm a big nerd.
Yeah, well, it is uber nerdy, dude.
It is, isn't it? But it's fun.
It is very fun. But yeah, I like doing this a whole bunch of characters I do. But that's how I like sort of diffuse things on the on the schoolyard.
Yeah.
Was making people laugh. If people are laughing at you, it's harder for them to hit you.
That's it.
So I used to do characters in the playground. So I was really good at doing Bart Simpson's voice before my voice broke, which sucked because I was very good at it. But yeah, I like doing Family Guy. I can do most of those guys. I can do
Stewie.
I can do Stewie.
Well, give us a Stewie.
This is my friend Brian.
Nice.
Say cool whip. Call. Say whip. Whip. Yeah. Whip.
Right.
No, I can't do it anymore. I'm too embarrassed now.
That means you're doing good.
Yeah, no, I got to do it pre-record.
Yeah.
Pre-record or when I'm drunk.
It's always when someone puts you on the spot, eh? It's not always going to be as good as what you
think. Yeah, that's true. It's true. But yeah, no, but I got the acting bug though. Yeah, I got the acting bug. I want to go and act in more movies.
Very cool.
So I've always been the henchman in the background of my own movies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I've never really done any monologue stuff until I was working with Maria Tran.
Right.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun. So I got to do a fight scene and do choreography for it, learn my lines. I remember the first time I tried to do my lines. Oh, man, I sucked. Sorry, Maria, that was a lot of work. But once I got into it, then I remembered my lines. I forgot my lines. Like I studied them so hard, and I got
you have to have
stage
good
right.
memory, right?
Very good memory.
Yeah, so that's why I can never be an actor. My memory is shocking.
Well, I'm very good at doing monologues, like because you're talking about movies before when you were watching VHS as someone that's reviewed them. Yeah. I'd always memorize bad guy monologues. Yeah. That was my thing. I love being the bad guy. I love playing the bad guy, and I love doing their voices. And I like writing my own bad guys and giving them their own voice. And that's a big part of it, is finding your voice. Yeah. It's the same in music, right? So when I started out as a heavy metal singer, you reference people that you know. You reference your heroes. And you emulate them. But after a while, you go, well, what about me? Who am I? Who is my voice?
Exactly.
And it comes out in writing as well. You copy things that you like writing, and then you eventually find your voice as a writer. Right, well, you as a writer, are you a blinking cursor guy, or do you plan it out? How do you approach the writing process?
Look, I've done all the screenwriting courses from all the grades, right? So I'm one of these. There we go. So I spent the last 20 years constantly just educating myself, reading all the screenwriting books, did all the courses, did the seminars, did everything, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Still, no. There we go. Yep. There we go. I feel like it's right in my face.
Yeah, there we go. Now we're good.
Yeah, so spending thousands of dollars on educating myself on how to be a screenwriter.
Yeah.
I mean, writing was never the passion; it was just a means to an end. How can I tell my story in the best possible way?
Yeah.
And knowing the lingo of how to be a screenwriter and how to do treatments and knowing what your log lines are and doing 1 pages and 4 pages and I studied all those things for years and trying to perfect it so when it came to a point where I was going to write something, I knew exactly how to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, the process was always, going through the way they taught us to do it. Like start with your logline. What's your idea? Can you put that in a sentence? And this is what I tell all filmmakers. They always ask me, like, where do I start? I've got an idea. I go, can you encapsulate your whole film in 1 line or 1 paragraph?
Yeah.
Because it's really tough. I'm still struggling with it.
Yeah, elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch. Exactly.
Yeah, how do you elevator pitch it?
And then turn that into a couple paragraphs. Can you do a 1-pager? Can you do a 2-pager? And you got to sit there thinking, how can I summarize my whole film into having that one idea into 1 page, potentially. So writing Streets of Colour, it took me 3 years because that was part time, right? Maybe it was 1 year full time, right? Maybe I don't know. It's hard to say how long it took.
Yeah.
But it was never hard to write. It was never. I've written other scripts that have been shelved over the years. But this one was the most personal one because it's obviously
driven to get it done.
Yeah, not only that because it was personally it's my story as well. So all the others were like sci-fis and thrillers and all sorts of stuff. All different genres. So I never had writer's block on this one, whereas I had writer's block on creating other things because I think some of the best directors in the world. I think Spielberg said, write what you know as your first film. Don't go out and try to make the big Hollywood film, which I actually did. Funnily enough, my first feature is called The Day Hollywood Died. It's not a very good film. It was an experimental film done by a bunch of students, but we just wanted to do a Tarantino-esque style, 1 location film with a bit of VFX and just having a bit of fun and all that sort of stuff. But it was a good vehicle to understand how to actually put a whole film, a feature film, together because it's like potentially making a feature film that's 90 minutes or more is like making maybe 10 short films, and that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have a lot of education, in the span of what we thought was going to be 2 years ended up being a 5-year project.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew what the idea was going to be, like I mentioned earlier about the visceral sort of encounter that I had,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that it was going to be about that, but I didn't know how do you make that into a film. I knew that I wanted to make a film based in Western Sydney. I wanted to show what how we grew up and the culture, and to us it's always been the hood. We're from the hood, and growing up in the 90s, films like Boys in the Hood was a film that we would always go to watch.
Yeah.
And I even remember getting a bootleg, a VHS bootleg of that film.
Yeah.
We would share it around. Everyone would copy it. The quality was so bad. Do you remember those days?
Popular Western Sydney film.
Yeah.
Not a Western Sydney film, but a popular film
for Western Sydney people. Yeah,
people.
Because I guess at that time we never saw ourselves on screen.
Yeah.
I know,
that's the closest reference that we had.
Closest reference was maybe it wasn't as as violent, I guess.
Yeah, no, less gun violence. Yeah, less gun violence for sure.
But I mean, it got worse over the years. Cause people say to me, "Oh, yeah, you got drive-bys in your trailer and stuff," and I'm like, "Yes, drive-bys have happened in the area."
They do happen. I've watched one happen.
Yeah, and so people are taken back that like they're from the area, but they never experienced what I experienced. And that's a good reference to my wife, who's actually from the area of Mount Druitt, and her father was a police officer in the local areas and stuff too, and she never experienced anything that I experienced in what you see in Streets of Colour.
Yeah.
She was like on the right side of the tracks almost.
Yeah.
Even though I was a little bit further away from the actual core CBD of like Mount Druitt, if you like, she was right there.
Yeah.
So it's quite unique experience what I've had growing up in the same area as other people. And I've had people commenting, or maybe one person commented on one of the posts on Facebook saying, "Is this the same Mount Druitt that I grew up with? Because I experienced none of this." I'm like, well, I said, lucky you. Because I did.
Yeah.
So it's
profound, man.
Yeah. So
so that was your approach to it. So you sort of like unpacked it.
Yeah. So sorry, you asking about the process. So I always start with the log line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that sort of developed. It changed a little bit over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then what I thought I was writing sort of changed and developed and morphed into something else almost.
Yeah.
So
has a tendency of doing that.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that because I did write other stuff and co-wrote with other people, but I never had sat down and wrote my story and then think, okay, how can I make this entertaining?
Yeah.
Because not everyone's personal life can be made into a feature film.
Well, that's a really important statement to make, right? Because people go, I want to tell this story. Like, I'll give you an example. I've seen ones that are like, suicide films. Mm-hmm. They're a good example. People go, I want to bring suicide awareness. And you go, all right, well, that's a hard topic.
Yeah.
Suicide's a very difficult topic. So there's been some suicide films that I watched. I go, yeah, that is bringing awareness to it. But there's other ones that I watch that go, oh, it's a bit of suicide embellishment there that you're doing. It's not. Yeah. How do you make suicide entertaining? Like that's a hard thing to do.
That's a good point that you're making because I grappled with that idea too. Like how do I tell a story about racism and culture and not have it be boring?
Yeah.
How do you make it exciting? So I did a lot of research. Remembered a lot of things that I grew up with. Like I said, it's actually quite authentic. So even though the drive-by didn't happen to me, say for example, but it did happen to people that I knew. We knew certain events that had happened to people that we knew from the area. So I thought, let's do that. Let's take my personal experience of the racism, that it's going to be the core story for the protagonist, and then use this other stuff that's happened around the area, and that's sort of the embellishment, if you like.
Yeah.
But it's still quite authentic because it happens.
Yeah.
It might not happen in the exact same way, and that's where you have, as a filmmaker and as a storyteller, that's where you have creative license as well. So people might say, well, I don't believe that would have happened in the area. It does. You can go look it up. You can research it.
Yeah, it's totally there.
And you know how they say, is art imitating life or life imitating art?
It's a paradox.
It's a paradox.
I reckon it's a paradox. Yeah.
But I found this out 2 years after we had shot the film. I think roughly. Don't quote me on the dates, but in the film, it's, unfortunately, someone gets stabbed in a racist street fight.
Yeah.
Where the location where we shot that,
yeah,
somebody actually got stabbed in that same location like a couple years later.
Yeah.
It wasn't racially motivated.
Yeah, but it's still something violent happened there, yeah.
So in the exact same spot. And I was just like, somebody told me that later on. I'm like, really? That's really strange.
Yeah. Yeah. How bizarre.
It is bizarre.
Yeah. Well, look, but it's great that you're tackling that, man, because how do you make that entertaining and how do you go approach that? And Sounds like you've really gone on a journey with it, man.
Yeah. Like I said, you have to entertain, to educate and inspire. You can't just go, hey, I'm going to make a suicide film or a film about racism and just make it purely about that. And so that's why it's got so much. It's got action. It's got a romance story.
Well, yeah, there's another
everything
problem.
we grew up with. Do you know what I mean?
Well, there's another problem I see with some Western Sydney films that are made by outsiders, and they tend to be a bit of a poverty porn. They're showing, these poverty.
Let's show the worst of the area. That's I call that one-sided journalism. It's what they did with Struggle Street. I mean, I don't know if you came across it. Yeah, and the trucks were all lining up and blocking SBS Studios, whatever it was at the time, and there was a lot of people who I came in contact with in the area. Think what are you guys doing? Like when they saw the big, because we use big cameras, Alexa cameras, and so you could see that it was a professional set, and so people were worried that we were going to do another documentary.
Yeah, and actually mistreat it. Yeah,
exactly. And my core goal was always to show that I'm proud of where I came from. I'm proud that I grew up in the Mount Druitt area.
Yeah.
It's such a great close knit community. Yeah, it's got its problems like every other area, and I cover those topics within the film because this story potentially could be told anywhere. It could be in Redfern. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It just happened to be authentic because that's where I grew up with. Grew up in. So I made it a very good point to make sure that I showed the good, the bad, and the ugly of the area.
Yeah.
I wasn't shying away from saying, hey, let's not show the bad stuff because we're being demonized too much in the media. They do embellish things in their stories, with everything. With
sensationalism,
with everything, right?
Sensationalism, outrage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was very careful to make sure that we showed the good people, the bad people, all the different colours, and that's why it's called Streets of Colour, because you have all different colours, races, cultures, religions, all encapsulated in one film. And maybe I'm trying to tell too much in a film. I'm yet to hear from an audience, but I think it's important to be able to tell a story about racism, culture, self-identity. We all grew up. We always had a girlfriend or a boyfriend, whatever it is. You grew up with. And try to tell that story and go, oh yeah, I can relate to that. I can relate to that. And so,
All right. Well, just one more time, just to give this a bit of a plug, man. Where can we go and see this movie?
The Hayden I'll say it again.
The Hayden Orpheum.
The Hayden Orpheum Picture Palace, I think they call it.
Yeah.
And it's on the Monday 20 June. I'm not good at doing this.
Let me give it a go. I'll give it a crack for you. Go and check out Streets of Colour at the Hayden Orpheum Theatre. It's the world premiere on the 26th of June at 7:30 p.m. Be there or be square. It is going to be an absolute hoot. Go and check it out.
Yeah, we got a Q&A afterwards as well. So you guys want to ask some questions about the film, and maybe I'll have something different to say that I haven't said here.
Yeah, well, man, look, I hope it all goes really well for you, man.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
I think, this is obviously a lot of hard work. It looks like it's going to be absolute mint. I can't wait to see it.
Thank you, man.
And, man, you should be really proud to get this far, and I hope that it all works out, man, and I hope you get the right ticket sales and you get into those streaming services, because I reckon if you get this out the streaming services, you'll be able to trump those film festivals that haven't given you the right time of day,
Yeah, very true.
But man, if people wanted to go and check you out online, where could they go?
They can find me pretty much anywhere. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I've got a production company called Skycross Entertainment, which I share with a couple of guys, Drew and Nenef, and we're gonna be developing some more content, hopefully, and we'll just see how this all goes. And
yeah, man, this might be the trigger that you need.
Yeah, well, that's what it's all for, right? It's a calling card, potentially,
Yeah, totally, man. Well, man, it's a 7 years journey, man, and you've come this far, so congratulations.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I really enjoyed our time today, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, you've been watching The Pagey Train. You can check us out on Spotify. That's right, video on Spotify. And you can also go and check us out on YouTube. And if you're there, don't forget to subscribe. But if you're one of our avid listeners, you can check us out on iTunes or iHeartRadio. You guys have been watching The Pagey Train, and we'll see you next time. Yeah, that's it, man. We're done.
Good. How many times have you done that?
This is 137.
Oh, wow, man. How long have you had this podcast for?
5 years now.
It's been 5 years. Wow.
Yeah.
We've been